Scary Stories Treasury, collected from folklore and retold by Alvin Schawartz. Illustrated by Stephen Gamel. The Window. Margaret and her brothers, Paul and David, shared a small house on top of a hill just outside the village. It was so warm one summer's night that Margaret could not sleep. She sat up in bed in the darkness of her room, watching the moon move across the sky. Suddenly something caught her eye. She saw two small yellow-green lights moving through the woods near the graveyard at the bottom of the hill. They looked like eyes of some animal, but she could not make out what kind of creature it was. Soon the creature left the woods and moved out the hill toward the house for a few minutes. Margaret lost sight of it. Then she saw it come across the lawn toward her window. It looked something like a man, and yet it didn't. Margaret was terrified. She wanted to run from her room, but the door was next to her window. She was afraid the creature would see her and break in before she could escape. When the creature turned and moved in another direction, Margaret rushed to the door, but before she could open the door, it was back. Margaret found herself staring through the window at a shrunken face like that of a mummy. Its yellow-green eyes glared like a cat's eyes. She wanted to scream, but she was so frightened that she could not make a sound. The creature broke the window glass, unlocked the window, and crawled inside. Margaret tried to flee, but the creature caught her. It twisted its long, bony fingers into her hair, pulled back her head, and sank its teeth into her throat. Margaret screamed and fainted. When her brothers heard the piercing scream, they rushed into her room. But by the time they got the door unlocked, the creature had fled. Margaret lay on the floor, bleeding and unconscious. While Paul tried to stop the bleeding, David chased the creature down the hill and toward the graveyard, but soon he lost sight of it. The police thought it was a work of an escaped lunatic who believed he was a vampire. When Margaret recovered, her brothers wanted to move her to a safer place where it would be harder to break in, but Margaret refused. The creature would never come back, she was sure of that. But just in case, Paul and David began to keep loaded pistols in their rooms. One night, months later, Margaret was awakened by a scratching sound at the window. When she opened her eyes, there was some shrunken face staring at her. The night her brothers heard her cries in time. They chased the creature down the hill, and David shot it in the leg, but the creature managed to scramble over the graveyard wall and disappeared near an old burial vault. The next day, Margaret and her brothers watched as the sexton of the church opened the burial vault. Inside was a horrifying scene. Broken coffins, bones, and rotting flesh were scattered all over the floor. Only one coffin had not been disturbed. When the sexton opened it, there lay the creature with the shrunken face that had attacked Margaret. The telltale bullet was in its leg. They did the only thing they knew how to rid themselves of a vampire. The sexton built a roaring blaze outside the vault and fed the shrunken body to the flames. They watched as the body burned until nothing remained but ashes. A story favorited by me, Awarbore, from the Scary Stories Treasury. It is the story Sounds. The house was near the beach. It was a big old place where nobody had lived for years. From time to time, somebody would force open a window or a door and spend the night there, but never longer. 3 fishermen caught in a storm took shelter there one night. With some dry wood they found inside, they made a fire in the fireplace. They lay down on the floor and tried to get some sleep, but none of them slept that night. First, they heard footsteps upstairs. It sounded like there were several people moving back and forth, back and forth. When one of the fishermen called, "Who's up there?" the footsteps stopped. Then they heard a woman scream. The scream turned into a groan and died away. Blood began to drip from the ceiling into the room where the fishermen huddled. A small red pool formed on the floor and soaked into the wood. A door upstairs crashed shut, and again the woman screamed, "Not me!" she cried. It sounded as if she was running, her high heels tapping wildly down the hall. "I'll get you!" a man shouted, and the floor shook as he chased her. Then, silence. There wasn't a sound until the man who had shouted began to laugh. Long peals of horrible laughter filled the house. It went on and on until the fishermen thought they would go mad. When finally it stopped, the fishermen heard someone coming down the stairs, dragging something heavy that bumped each step. They heard him drag it through the front hall and out the front door. The door opened, and then it slammed shut. Again, silence. Suddenly, a flash of lightning filled the house with a green blaze of light. A ghastly face stared at the fishermen from the hallway. Then came a crash of thunder. Terrified, they ran out into the storm.
Somebody fell from aloft. I'd signed on as an ordinary seaman on the Falls of Ettrick, a merchant ship bound for England. The first time I saw that ship, I knew her right away. She was the old Gertrude Spurshoe. I'd sailed on her years before when she was painted brown and gold. Now she was painted black and had a new name, but it was the same ship for sure. We had a pretty good crew for that voyage, except for one hard-looking ticket named McLaurin. He was a pretty good seaman, but there was something about him I didn't trust. He was kind of secretive, kept mostly to himself. One day somebody told him that I had worked on the old Gertrude. For some reason he got all a tremble over that. Then I netched him, giving me all of these ugly black looks, as if he was itching to knife me in the back. I guess it had something to do with the Gertrude, but I didn't know what. Well, this one day I was trying out our way through a dripping black fog. You'd scarcely know we had all the lights on, and it was a dead calm. There wasn't a breath of fresh air. The ship had just laid there, wallowing in a trough, a-rollin' and a-rollin', going nowheres. I was standing my watch round midships, and McLaurin was doing his trick at the wheel. The rest of the crew was scattered around one place and another. It was as quiet as can be. Then all at once, whacko! This thing hits the deck, right in front of McLaurin. He lets go a screech that turns my blood cold, and he falls down in a faint. A second mate starts yelling. Somebody has fallen from aloft. Laying out there, just forward of the wheel, was someone or something dressed in oilskins, with blood oozing out from underneath. The captain ran and fetched a big light from his cabin, so he could see who it was. They kind of straightened him out to get a good look at his face. He was a big, ugly-looking devil, but nobody knew who he was or what he was doing up there. At least nobody was saying. When McLaurin came out from his faint, they tried to get something out of him. All he did was jabber away and keep rolling these big, wild-looking eyes of his. Everybody was getting more and more excited. We all wanted to heave the body overboard as quick as we could. There was something weird about it, as if it wasn't real. The captain wasn't sure about getting rid of it that way. Could it be a stowaway, he asked? But the ship was so filled with lumber we were carrying, there was no space where a living thing could hide for 3 weeks, which is how long we'd been out. Even if it was a stowaway, he was doing it aloft on such a day. There was no reason for anyone to be up there. There was nothing to see. Finally the captain gave up and told us to heave him on board. Then nobody would touch him. The mate ordered us to pick him up, but nobody made a move. Then he tried coaxing, but that didn't do any good. Suddenly, that loony McLaurin starts yelling. I handled him once, and I can handle him again. Picks up the body and staggers over the railing with it. He's just about to throw it overboard when it wraps its 2 big long arms around him, and over they go together. Then on the way down, one of them starts laughing in a horrible way. The mates are yelling to launch a boat, but nobody would get in the boat. Not on a nut like that. We threw a couple of life preservers after him, but everybody knew it wouldn't help. So that was that. Or was it? The first chance I had to go home after that, I went right over to see old Captain Spurshoe, who was the captain of the Gertrude. Well, he says, "One trip, these two outlandish men shipped aboard the Gertrude. One was McLaurin, the other one was a really big fella. The big one was always picking on McLaurin, thumping him around, and McLaurin was always talking about how he would get him back. Well, this wet dirty night the two of them was up there alone, and the big one come flying down, killed himself, deader'n a herring. McLaurin says the foot rope they were using parted, and how he almost fell himself, but everybody who saw that rope knew she didn't give away on her own. She'd been cut through with a knife, and whenever we came into port, McLaurin thought we were going to get the police on him, and he'd been pretty scared, but we couldn't prove anything, so we didn't try. In the end, I guess the big fellow took care of things in his own way. If he was a ghost that came back, that's what he was. If there be things like ghosts." Oh, Susanne. One of my favorite stories of this book. Susanne and Jane shared a small apartment near the university where they were students. When Susanne got back from the library one night, the lights were out and Jane was asleep. Susanne undressed in the dark and quietly got into bed. She had almost fallen asleep when she heard someone humming the tune to the song, "Oh, Susanne." "Jane," she said, "please stop humming. I want to go to some sleep." Jane didn't answer, but the humming stopped, and Susanne fell asleep. She awakened early the next morning, too early, she decided, and she was trying to get back to sleep, when she heard the humming once more. "Please go back to sleep," she told Jane. "It's too early to get up." Jane didn't answer, but the humming continued. Susanne became very angry. "Cut it out," she said. "It's not funny." When the humming still didn't stop, she lost her temper. She jumped out of bed, pulled the covers off Jane, and screamed. Jane's head was gone. Somebody'd cut it off. "I'm having a nightmare," Susanne told herself. "When I wake up, everything will be all right."